and jerked inside me as he released his seeds, moaning. For several minutes, we both lay half-sprawled on the desk, trying to catch our breaths. I buried my fingers in Nolan's hair and caressed his scalp. After a while, maybe 10 minutes, he lifted his head and gazed at me. I smiled at him, but he didn't smile back. He seemed to be thinking of something, or maybe he was just lost in the abyss of pleasure. When my back began to hurt, however, I tried to shift his weight off me. "Heavy?" he asked. The corner of his mouth twitched. "Duh." I laughed softly, a laugh that turned to a sigh when he withdrew and sat on the previously discarded seat. "Whoever cleans this room tomorrow is going to have one hell of a time." He laughed. I glanced at him from the corner of my eye as I sat up on the desk. "Wouldn't that be me?" "You still believe I hired you to punish you?" After all that, he gestured between our naked bodies. I shrugged. The mist of orgasm was beginning to clear and reason dawned. Not regret, though. My body was too happy to be regretful. Nolan was watching me. This time I recognized the look. Believe me, I've received enough of it from Mom, Yolanda, Grandma and Sophie to know the look. But Nolan's was softer. "At Greenville, you were the outgoing, bold and bubbling kind of girl. At first, I didn't know what to think about my new neighbors until you smiled and held your hand out to take mine. I never had a crush until then. I knew immediately what it was, and it scared me. But I wanted to be the kind of guy for you. I wanted to be bold enough to walk up to you and tell you how I felt, but I never got the chance. You started dating Jason." "Jason what?" "Scumbag." I snorted. He raised a brow. "You guys didn't end well." I sighed and shook my head. "Time to tell the truth. We didn't because I found him eating your fiancé out in his bed." His brows furrowed. "Lorraine?" "Yup. On my birthday no less." I looked away from him. Now that the conversation was getting serious, I sought my clothes. Nolan reached for my gown before me and pushed it further out of my reach with a mischievous crooked smile. Anyway, I continued with a sigh, feeling comfortable in my nakedness. I got drunk that night. No, not drunk, just pleasantly tipsy, but it gave me the excuse I needed to force myself on you. It was supposed to be my perfect revenge. And I ruined it. You are not mad? That was I a tool for revenge? I didn't know it at the time, but now? It's in the past, Chantel. And I know Lorraine enough to know that she never apologized for it. For some reason, I am not exactly surprised she did something like that to you. You guys hung together every single day." He blushed a bit when he added, "I used to watch you through my fence." The blush and sudden shyness were cute. Nolan of the past would do that. Still, I couldn't dwell too much on it because I still had a lot to confess. "So that's what destroyed the friendship you both had?" I nodded. "Yeah, and after that night I gestured between us, spent together, it only got worse. You left town before I could apologize. I felt miserable, but even more miserable when Lorraine began to spread rumors. Only that they weren't really rumors, they were true gossip about my pregnancy." "What kind of rumors?" I opened my mouth to speak and closed it back. Good sex or not, I couldn't find the courage to tell Nolan about his son. When he kept looking at me, waiting for me to go on, I looked away from him and answered vaguely. "Oh, you know, just the usual jealous girl rumors." He started to speak. I knew he wanted me to elaborate. I wasn't ready for that yet, so I asked a question of my own. "So how did you and Lorraine meet?" His answer was quick and simple. "A contract." My eyes flew to his. "A contract?" I finally asked when I found my voice. He nodded. "It's a long story. My dad was arrested for murder and other related offenses. Before then, I was the kid with a whore for a mother. People made sure to let me know everywhere we went. But when my father got arrested, he sought me as his only heir to take over operations in his company. I accepted the offer because at the time I was mad at you and the women in the world. It sounds stupid, but I wanted to be more, to be better and seen. I took the offer and became his heir, accepted the empire, and realized belatedly that my dad was in debt. The authorities seized most of his assets after he was jailed. I turned to his friends for help and only Matt Wolf stepped up, but there was only so much he could do. Then came Douglas Grant with a mouth-watering offer. A contract. All I had to do was marry his daughter, work with him, and be free to regrow my dad's empire. I realized too late that I had just walked into another trap. But I was ready to follow through because life meant nothing to me anymore. You had to sell something to gain something and, for me, I was selling my freedom in exchange for wealth. He looked at me, his green eyes spoke volumes of his next words. Until I ran into you again. When I couldn't find the words to say, he drew closer and pulled my legs to his lap. I don't want to be trapped anymore. I want out. You, Chantel, you are my freedom. I love you. It sounds stupid, but I have always loved you. For so long. Even after those years of anger and hate. I've loved you too long to stop now. Tears rolled down my cheeks. But I hurt you. I pointed out. Because you were hurt. And I share the blame because I let you. I pined so long for you that I let you in, so the blame isn't only yours. Also, his gaze turned playful, I bet that if I had fucked you well as I did just now you wouldn't be saying this. Despite the tears in my eyes, I laughed. You should have tried harder then. He laughed and rolled his eyes, then turned serious. I am willing to try harder now. Only if you want me to. Do you want me, Chantel Jones? I didn't hesitate with my answer. Nodding vigorously. Good. It's about time you let someone love you. You know the first thing I noticed when I saw you again at Penelope's office? What? My ass. I teased. He chuckled. Of course, it's hard not to notice. Then he turned serious. The sadness in your eyes. It seems to me that you accepted you weren't good enough for your ex, and therefore aren't good enough for anyone else. But that's a lie, Chantel. You are better than that. Better than what Lorraine makes you think. I love you, and I want you. My heart sang. Tears made my sight blurry. What about the contract? I will handle that. He rose and kissed me deeply. The warmth that spread over me had nothing to do with arousal. It felt like the beginning of something new, the foreign feeling I felt when I looked at my son, Nolan, for the first time. For the first time, I was appreciated, loved, even when I couldn't love myself. I made the decision there and then. Nolan should know about his son. Wow! Was the first thing Sophie said as soon as I walked through the door. When you said you were going to be late, I didn't think you meant 2 o'clock, late. What kept you so long? She rose from the couch and followed me into the kitchen where I went to get a cold glass of water because I was going to need that or something stronger to handle her reaction to the news I had for her. She let me down the water in peace, but once I dropped the glass she wanted an explanation. So? Where is Nolan? I asked as a diversion, stalling for time so that I could put my thoughts together. Even with the half-hour drive from the office, I still couldn't figure out a way to compose my thoughts. Nolan had offered to drive me home and send my car home for me, but I refused his offer, not because I didn't want it, but because I knew he would want to come in for a while for more lovemaking. Not that I didn't want that too, but I figured I had to prepare my best friend and my son first before letting him into our lives. Sophie's curiosity became something sad. Her brows fell over her eyes, and she shook her head slowly. He is in bed. You won't believe what happened to him today. What happened to him? I asked, maternal instincts already kicking in. He got into a fight at school. When I went to pick him up from school, he had a busted lip, but the other kid was worse, Coco. Nolan gave him a black eye and a loose tooth. He wouldn't even speak to me when I asked him what happened, so I spoke to his teacher. She said the other boy called Nolan's mom, "You, a whore." What? My eyes widened. Yup. Kids are cruel. I slumped against the sink. God, no. Not my little baby. He was defending me and got in trouble for it. Is this a sign? Nolan has to know about his son, whether or not he wants to take him away from me. Nolan needs to know his mother is not a whore and his father never abandoned him. It wasn't Nolan's fault. It was mine because I chose not to tell him about his father. Well, I looked up from my brooding and found Sophie watching me, and I knew I couldn't keep it in anymore. I have something to tell you, I confessed. I could tell from the moment you walked in. What is it then? Out with it. I'm in love with Nolan. A few minutes passed. I expected to look up and find Sophie laughing at me, but when I did look at her, she had tears in her eyes. She made her way toward me. I know it's only been a few days, but I know I'm in love with him. I don't care what you think right now, I'm in love with him, and I'm going to tell him about Nolan. They deserve to know each other. If Nolan knew his father, this would not have happened. I don't want my little baby to become an object of ridicule among his peers, and I don't want him to have to go violent to defend my honor every time. By this time, Sophie had made her way to me. Though tears shimmered in her eyes, she was smiling. Puzzled, I frowned. Where have you been, Chantal Coco Jones? She asked. My frown deepened. She put her arms around me. Did you hear me, Sophie? I said I am in love with Nolan. I want to tell him about Nolan. When do you intend to do that? Okay, she is way too accepting of this. I had anticipated a fight, an argument, not acceptance. Sophie? If you think I'm going to stop you, you have another thought coming in. She pulled away from me. Chantal, when was the last time you made a decision without worrying about other people's opinions? But now look at you. I am not going to stop you, you already made up your mind before you walked right through that door. She sniffed and took my hands, looking solemnly into my eyes. Since you walked in on Jason and Lorraine, I have watched you second-guess every decision you make. They made you think less of yourself. You went from being the confident, intelligent, outspoken girl I knew to someone who withdrew into herself. Someone who made herself believe that she wasn't good enough. I tried. God knows I tried to bring you out of that shell, but you fought me at every turn. No one has the power to make you think less of yourself unless you let them. She paused for breath. You made a decision before walking in tonight. I saw the determination in your eyes when you walked in. You are right. Nolan deserves to know his son. I know you to be a good judge of character. If you think he deserves to know, then go ahead with it. I don't know about being a good judge of character, I sniffed, feeling the tears pool in my eyes. I was wrong about Jason and Lorraine. People change and are jerks. That doesn't make you a failure. Follow your gut. She peered intently at me. Unless you are afraid of what Lorraine might think. I don't care about that bitch, I snorted. Neither does Nolan. It was Sophie's turn to frown. It occurred to me then that everyone else still thought the engagement was real. A sudden excitement rose inside me. What Nolan and Lorraine had was bound by a contract, but what he and I had was free, fair, and safe. What do you mean? I broke down the details for her without getting too deep, just the details she already knew about reuniting with Nolan, the engagement party. I left out the part where we kissed and touched. Finally, I talked about what happened tonight, the situation Nolan found himself in, and why he had to be engaged to Lorraine. Though surprise was plastered all over her face, Sophie had a mischievous glint in her eyes. You were with Nolan all night, weren't you? We were working, and we had a dinner invitation. When she looked closer with that mischievous glint growing in her eyes, I couldn't help the smile that touched my lips. But out. She laughed. Never. Chantal, you know how persistent I can be. Suddenly leaning closer to take a sniff of me, she opened her mouth. You smell different. You had sex. That's my business and not yours, but out, Mom, I laughed. She raised her hands in mock surrender. Okay. I'm not going to intrude. So, do you want to take that step now? I am solidly behind you. She reached for me again and hugged me tightly before wrinkling her nose at me, telling me I smelled like sex and needed a nice hot bath. She couldn't have been more right. After our heavy discussion, I was surprised to see Nolan was hardening again and reaching for me. He had bent me over the desk this time and entered swiftly from behind, so yes, I do need that nice hot bath, and tomorrow Nolan and I will be on our way to see Daddy. The next day I woke up with a smile on my face, a vast difference from the many times I have woken up slapping the heck out of my alarm. I stretched languorously, fingers and toe tips reaching for the ends of my room. When I finally sat up in bed, I almost had a heart attack when I saw the time. It was almost noon. Grabbing my phone in case I missed any calls, I turned it on and there I saw a message from Nolan. "Sleep in today, baby. You deserve a rest after last night. I miss you. I love you." I found myself smiling like an idiot in love, and I was, as I rose from the bed and padded out of the room to the bathroom. Downstairs, an anime show was going on, which meant Sophie was still home and so was Nolan. Grateful to have a friend like Sophie for the millionth time, I opened the bathroom and freshened up. Before I finished, however, Nolan came bounding into the bathroom still dressed in his PJs, and he looked as pleased as punch. "Mommy!" A small gasp escaped my lips at the discoloration of his lips. I had not wanted to disturb him last night, otherwise I would have gone to check on him as soon as I went upstairs. Now I wish I had. The cut was healed, but it was swollen and still red-tinged. Nolan came close and hugged me tightly. I bent to lift him in my arms to better see the injury. "I fought yesterday," he confessed. Though his voice was full of remorse, his tone was one of satisfaction. His small hands wrapped around my neck. "My classmate called you a bad name because I don't have a daddy." "I'm so sorry, baby." I buried my face in his thick curly hair, breathing him in. He was putting on a brave face, but I could hear the heavy beat of his heart through his shirt. My poor baby. He was scared. And sad. "Auntie Sophie says I don't have to go to school today. She says we have somewhere to go." "Yes, baby." I took a deep breath. "You have a daddy, and we are going to see him today." His eyes went as wide as saucers. His tiny mouth dropped open, and for a moment I thought he was frozen with shock. Then he let out a high-pitched shriek that soon dissolved into a teary laugh. "I have a daddy," he cried. Green eyes that looked so much like Nolan's gazed at me, hopefully. When I nodded, a teardrop fell from his eyes, and my heart contracted with emotions so deep I was having trouble naming them. I wiped his face carefully, kissing his cheeks, trying not to let tears of my own fall down my cheeks. Nolan hiccuped, laughing and crying all at once. "Mommy, does Daddy want me?" I frowned at the question. Ben said I don't have a daddy because he doesn't want me and my bad mommy. That's why I hit him. I took his hand in mine and kissed his palm. "Your daddy wants to see you." "He wants you," I declared with hope. Nolan doesn't know he has a son, but one look at Nolan and anyone would see the resemblance. And knowing Nolan as I do now, he would have questions but wouldn't turn his son out. With that in mind, I assured my son some more and let him down so that we could both prepare for the big reunion. Sophie offered to prepare Nolan so that I would have enough time to look my best, in her own words. I got dressed with a smile on my face and ate with a smile on my face until Sophie began to tease me. By 3 in the afternoon, we were ready to leave. The plan was simple. We would have a walk in the park and go from there to the address Nolan had given me the night before. It was safe in my purse. I sent a short message to announce my arrival to Nolan, which he responded to almost immediately. He would leave the office early to meet me at his house. He had already given the housekeeper word to let me in. With all that said, all that was left was to find the right way to introduce father and son to each other. My hands and feet were cold, but I knew it had to be done. Still thinking about that, I didn't notice the car that pulled up beside Nolan and me as we walked and talked excitedly on the deserted street about seeing Daddy. Since it was noon and people were either at work or school or wherever, the street wasn't crowded until strong hands took hold of my arms. Nolan was yanked from my grip before I could react. As soon as I opened my mouth to scream, a huge hand muffled my scream. Before I knew it, I was being forced into the back of a black car with tinted windows and a blindfold was thrown over my eyes. I checked my watch for what seemed like the 10th time since I arrived home. My home, not the one I shared with Lorraine. I got a stucco/remodeled farmhouse in the West End as soon as I got into my inheritance. It was the first thing I got for myself before making my claim as the son of Simone Pierce. But after the contract, Douglas got a house for Lorraine and me under her name. The address I gave Chantel was for my farmhouse. My heartbeat quickened at the thought of her. Last night was incredible. I never wanted it to end. It took all my self-control not to beg her to stay the night. I had suggested driving her home, but in her own words, "I have something you need to know." What could it be? The minibar in the living area was well stocked. My housekeeper, a middle-aged, highly efficient woman called Betty who worked for me and Mom, had cleaned the place and restocked the house with both food and wine. With any luck, I can convince Chantal to stay the night and nights after today. The skylight in the living room let in the silver moonlight, creating a cozy atmosphere. Everything was set. Now, where is Chantal? A few minutes later, fresh out of the bathroom and dressed in loose basketball shorts and a gray shirt, I poured myself a drink and waited. Just then, the doorbell rang. I jumped, and so did my heart. Forcing myself to calm down and not act like a randy youth in heat, I made my way to the door, took a breath, opened the door, and paused. The person outside the door was so not Chantal Jones. "What the hell are you doing here?" I demanded, without bothering to hide the hostility in my tone. Lorraine flashed a smile she thought was sexy, as if her smile could ever be as alluring again. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. "You didn't come home last night, honey," she said sweetly. Too sweetly. I said, "What are you doing here?" "I came to see you, my fiancé. Won't you let me in?" Though her voice remained light and teasing, a hard edge slipped in. Her eyes were hard. "Let me in, Nolan." Without waiting for an invitation, she pushed past me. By the time I closed the door and faced her, she was standing in the middle of the living room with my drink in her hand. I turned the lights on. "Wow, Nolan," she cooed softly, looking around the living room space with its simple yet expensive and efficient decor and designs. "I thought you gave up this little thing." I resisted the urge to drag her by the hand to throw her out. Instead, I jammed my hands into the pockets of my shorts, walked toward her, and stopped just within reach in case I had to give in to that urge later. "This little thing is my house." She snorted. "This is where you plan to make a family?" She took a sip of the whiskey and walked close until she was leveled with me in her heels. "With Chantal?" My blood ran cold. "What?" A triumphant glint entered her eyes. "I know about your little mistress, Nolan. You hired her and said nothing about it. Why? I'll tell you why. As with all men, you cannot be satisfied with just one woman. Am I not good enough for you, Nolan? What does Chantal have to offer that I can't?" I backed up a little when she came closer. "If I recall correctly, a clause in the contract states clearly that we both can have affairs as long as it doesn't interfere with our businesses. You suggested an open relationship, didn't you?" "That was my mistake," she said softly. "Let's start over, Nolan. I will give up all my boyfriends for us to start over." She was wearing a thin strapped top with a pair of jeans and heels. My gaze swept her body with distaste. She was either coming from a club or one of the said boyfriend's houses. Her fingers dove under one strap, and she pulled it down to reveal her bare chest. Before I could react, she was in front of me trying to dig into my shorts. I held her hand in a tight grasp to push her away. "What the heck are you doing?" "Getting back what is mine. We belong to each other." She raised her hand to dangle the engagement ring in my face. "Does this mean nothing to you?" "Did it mean anything to you?" She tried grabbing for my shorts again. This time I snapped the straps of her top back in place and pushed her off. Her eyes widened in surprise. "Yes, Lorraine, there is someone who can resist you." If I hadn't been so satisfied by her shock, I would have noticed the dark look that came into her eyes. "Should I remind you what will happen if you break our contract?" "I don't care," I shot back stubbornly. "Are you sure? You could end up on the streets once again. You will once again become the disgraced son of a murderer. You will be shunned by society, and everything you love, this house, including your beloved Chantal, will be gone before your eyes." "Don't mention her name ever again." "Oh really?" she said in a mockingly sweet tone. "Or what, Nolan? Aren't you afraid of what my father could do to you?" "I don't give a fuck." She hummed softly under her breath, then suddenly released a cruel laugh. At least this is the cruel Lorraine I know. Maybe you should. You should give a fuck about what I can do. You may never see your beloved Chantal ever again. The tone of her voice made my blood run cold. The cruel edge in her words was intentional. The way she smiled and circled me made the hair on my skin rise. Aren't you concerned about what has kept her so late? She should be here, right? Fury so blinding raced through my blood. Before I knew it, my hands snapped out when she began to circle me again. Within my grip, now I saw the cold satisfaction in her eyes. She grinned. Yes, Nolan. Be rough with me, you know how much I love it when you become the beast, she cooed in a silky voice. What did you do? I demanded. You haven't done anything funny, have you? Funny? Define funny, a snarl pulled her lips back. She snatched her arms free and pulled away. I did the right thing to protect my image. No one makes a fool of me and gets away with it. Especially not a loser like Chantal. She is right where she belongs. My muscles tightened, anger blurred my vision. I have never hit a woman before. Mom raised me better than that. But at that moment I thrust my hand out, took hold of Lorraine's slender throat and squeezed. Her purse clattered to the floor. Where is Chantal? She gasped. A hint of fear shone in her eyes. Good. I will not repeat myself, Lorraine. I can't let you go, Nolan. I love you. Regardless of the circumstances surrounding our relationship, I love you, she pleaded pathetically. No, you love your image, you love yourself so much that seeing me fall in love with another woman is unacceptable for you. I pulled her closer and squeezed harder. A reasonable part of my brain warned me to stop, but the other part of my brain, worried about Chantal, was blinded with rage. What has the lunatic done with her? Tell me where she is if you want to live. She laughed. Love? She suddenly gasped and struggled for air when I tightened my grip. Eventually, when she realized that struggling would get her nowhere, she sagged against my hands and gave me a resigned but angry glare. Fine. I'll take you where I kept her and that little brat. I frowned. Little brat? She smiled smugly. Oh, I see you don't know about your slutty girlfriend's little secret. Let go of my throat if you want to see your mistress for what she really is, Nolan. I didn't want to take any chances, so I pulled her upstairs with me, got a rope and tied her hands behind her back. So you are going to treat me like an animal after all that I have done for you? Any better than you have treated me? I countered. She kept mute. I took some extra precautions by calling Paul. Luckily, he was within the vicinity visiting one of the exclusive clubs. In less than 10 minutes, he was knocking at my door. When I opened the door to let him in, he took one look at Lorraine tied up in a corner and raised a brow at me. You want me to be a witness to BDSM? Strange request, man. That's not it, I said impatiently, pulling him in. She abducted Chantal. Paul's brows raised higher. Miss Chantal Jones? The one from... Yes, she's the one. I have to find her before Lorraine's goons do anything stupid. The playful smile on Paul's face cleared. What do you need me to do? Prevent me from killing her. He looked at Lorraine. There was no love lost between Paul and Lorraine, but at that moment the murderous look in his eyes for her gave me a pause. Still, it was a risk I was willing to take because I can't promise I wouldn't strangle Lorraine if I saw any more of her smug face. While I got the keys, Paul swung Lorraine over his shoulder and carried her outside to my car. She screamed and kicked him, promising a legal battle. By the time I got to the car, Lorraine was tucked in the back like a child fuming and cursing. You will both pay for this. She promised. Repeat that when you're free. Paul climbed in with her and I took the driver's seat. With reluctant directions from Lorraine, I navigated my way around the city. My chest felt tight, closing around my heart so tight I struggled to breathe. God, I hope Chantal is all right. And the little brat. My mind chased the phrase in my head. What little brat? What has Lorraine done? As the seconds ticked into minutes and minutes into an hour and a half later, I began to despair. Sweat rolled down my back. We were driving into an abandoned industrial part of the city. There were incomplete abandoned projects in the area. Lorraine directed us to one of them. The structure was dark, but the flickering lights from streetlights weakly illuminated the place. I drove carefully and packed a few yards from it. When I came out of the car, Paul was already pulling Lorraine out. Dimly, I heard her warn him not to handle her roughly. I understand the hate he has for her father, but I never knew it ran this deep. Once again, Lorraine gave directions. We entered the building. The stairs creaked, and the place reeked of urine and concrete. One of the rooms upstairs was dimly lit. Following the light, we made it upstairs after dodging metals and fallen bricks. A huge guy was patrolling the top floor. He raised his gun and started hurtling towards us with a warning and suddenly came to a stop when he saw Lorraine tied up. She glared at him. "Shoot and see what happens, idiot." "Sorry, ma'am," the guy said in a deep voice. He cast me and Paul wary glances, although it looked more like he was sizing us up. "But show them the woman." The man nodded and led the way. I forced myself to stay calm and walk quietly beside him, but once we got to the lit room, I couldn't help myself. I pushed past the man, ignoring his yelp as he smashed into the wall, and entered the room. And paused. There on the floor was Chantal, and there was a mini version of me tied up on the floor beside her.